Big Ten Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
Hey there, how's it going? And welcome into Big Ten Plus 4, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. If you're joining us on the video service, you see Sam Sprunger is moving outside.
Yeah.
You upset the wife? Are you at the new place to stay, or what's going on?
I'm at my mom's. I have somewhere I need to go, so I'm in Indiana. But we have been. She's got some fire like smoke detectors that are hardwired. Well, I've changed the batteries because they chirp. And I've changed the batteries, and they're all brand new batteries. Still chirps. So I believe there's a wiring problem, and I didn't really want the audio to have chirping in it. So yeah, beep.
Ting. They're in the back.
Actually, we could have just timed it out to where maybe one did it every quarter.
Oh,
that could have been our tweet today. Tweet.
That's just being efficient. That would have been the way to go.
Taking advantage, except for there's four of them all wired together, and literally one will beep, and 3 seconds later another one will go, and then it'll go 5 minutes without. I don't understand it, but
the joys
and I'm
of
working
adulting.
without a stand.
Look at you go.
Yeah. Adjusting.
Oh shoot, that's just part of life. And as we're doing this, actually, I'm in mid-Michigan. There's a storm rolling through at the time that we're recording this, and just received notice that 2,000 homes have lost power. So cross your fingers that we're staying on the whole time. Yeah. Sam being outside, he's praying the storm doesn't come his way. So we're all just kind of hoping here at this point.
Told you before we started, I said, well, it looks like it could rain. If you just see me grab my stuff and run, just keep going.
Yeah, so viewers be on the lookout for that.
That's the producer in me. Just keep working with it.
Yeah, that's it could be really entertaining for you folks. So just stay tuned and see how this all goes.
Maybe our best episode yet.
There is a lot of good reasons to be on this show, though, because here today we're going to be breaking down the Big Ten and the NBA draft. We mentioned last week we couldn't do it because we actually recorded our episode before the NBA draft. Now we can break that down a little bit this week. Also, we have a little bit of sound and video from Baker Mayfield, Michigan State head football coach Mel Tucker, and Kirk Herbstreit.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot to tell you this in pre-production. I never got the Baker Mayfield audio.
Oh, well, very good. Well,
or the Mel Tucker.
Well,
yeah, I've totally derailed us now, haven't I? I never got any of that.
We'll save it for another rainy day then, the Baker Mayfield and Mel Tucker, but we do have Kirk Herbstreit.
Correct. I apologize to make that announcement to you in the middle of the show, but
not a problem.
I was dealing with other stuff beforehand. Dalton.
Understood. We'll get to some of the Baker and some of the Mel Tucker stuff later on, because it's still a lot of good stuff. But Kirk Herbstreit, we do have for this show. He made his way into mid-Michigan for a golf outing. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But also we'll talk a little bit about Big Ten schedules for basketball. Also some hypotheticals that we've talked a little bit about for football as well. So there's a lot to get to.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of people say the summer there's not much sports news. Well, you know what? There is enough if you look. You know, the NBA draft, I was off a little bit on one thing, but I was dead on another. So.
Well, it's interesting too, because let's start with the NBA draft. And by the way, for the listeners and viewers, since we're kind of starting the show off, just a little bit of an announcement. This is the show before the 4th of July. Yes. Next week, Sam and I will not be on with a Big Ten Plus 4. So we're trying to go out with a bang, pun intended, fireworks. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks. Yeah, that's right. So
I'm a firm believer in vacations, Dalton.
Not a bad idea. Yeah, I got a couple still coming throughout the summer. Yeah,
we work hard.
We're due for a few. But nonetheless, so we won't have an episode next week.
Correct.
Just for programming notice. But let's go back to the NBA draft and start there, Sam, because this is what's interesting. We had a lot of conversations leading up to the draft, and I had said that one of the Big Ten prospects that maybe I'd invest the most in was Keegan Murray.
And it proved to work out there.
Keegan Murray ends up being the top Big Ten prospect off the board. And now all of a sudden I'm worried because the team that took him was the Sacramento Kings. And I just don't have faith in the Sacramento Kings. So I love Keegan Murray, but it's harder to see it all now.
You know what's funny is I made that same comment about Jaden Ivey going to Sacramento when he was the one that was being, projected to go there. I'm like, hey, good on him getting into the top 4, but I don't know that Sacramento's the best place. I don't think it's the best place for any prospect, to tell you the truth.
Right.
And I agree because for whatever reason, Chris Webber and Chris Webber and what was Vlade on the Kings at that time when they took the Lakers back in the early 2000s to Game 7 and then blew a huge lead. That's basically the last time they were relevant.
Yeah, I was trying to think of. I had this moment earlier where I was trying to think of other good Kings, and I was thinking of Mike Bibby. Bibby was there for a little bit, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't his original team either.
Right.
Like, it was kind of after he'd shopped around a little bit and finally ended up in Sacramento. Well, no, he was pretty decent in Sacramento. Yeah, I'm sorry. But Sacramento seems to have the habit of getting some talent and then either not producing with it or trading it away. Like Buddy Hield is in Indiana now.
Yep.
And when he signed his contract, I was, I even asked you, I think, that seems like an awful big contract. And I think you even said, it's for one thing, it's par for the course. You kind of got to play. The market is mandating that big of it, but he is better than what a lot of people see and think potentially. So I guess that contract wasn't a horrible sign by the Kings, but then a year or two later they traded him off anyways. So.
And they do have young pieces. I mean, to my knowledge, I think De'Aaron Fox is still there. So there's some stuff, but it's hard to have a lot of faith. And
their track history doesn't give you hope.
Correct. Yeah, that's kind of the blunt, honest way to put it. But for the Detroit Pistons, who picked at number 5, they get Jaden Ivey, who's the top guard to go in the draft. And now all of a sudden you're looking at Detroit and you're thinking Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham being in that backcourt together. I think Kemba Walker's still there for the moment.
I thought I saw they were going to cut him or buy him out.
There's something going on, so maybe by the time this even comes out, that this that doesn't hold true. But they're looking for a couple other pieces in free agency. But ultimately, that's a very young core to build around. I kind of like what's brewing in Detroit.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I've seen that are really high on what the Pistons did because after they got Ivy, they traded as part of getting Kemba Walker. They got I believe the Knicks first round pick, didn't they? Didn't the Knicks trade him in a 3-way trade and he ended up in Detroit? But then it's so crazy because a lot of people don't know Kobe Bryant was drafted by the Hornets.
Right.
Like they're like, he's a lifetime Laker. You're right. He played his entire career there, but he originally was a Hornet. And I can remember that draft that I was like, why in the world would Jerry West take a guy out of high school, when there are these others, and then ended up trading Vlade Divac it might have been him or maybe it was Eldon Campbell over to Charlotte to get Kobe Bryant. I'm like, well, I guess it turned out all right for him. So
yeah, just a little bit.
But my whole point is the trading, it's so crazy, and none of it's official until like a few days afterwards or whatever. So you get these announcements that the trades are happening, and this guy that was drafted by, I believe, maybe OKC drafted him, but he'd already been traded to the Knicks, which in turn then sent him to Detroit. I don't know, but yeah,
really muddies it up.
Detroit is setting itself up to be pretty good. They've got a pretty decent core now that I think maybe they're not going to be the Pistons of the past few years. They actually may be a presentable organization for a few years, anyways.
Well, and especially with the new format, it's not like it's impossible to make the playoffs anymore.
Sure.
And so you get this young group you surround it with. I know a lot of Pistons fans, because I'm here in Michigan, really want to see Miles Bridges come back home during the free agency.
Yeah, that was a big announcement there.
Well, I think right now he's still open, and I think he's between the Hornets and Pistons, I believe.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that he's not signing a max. Like the Hornets said, no, we're not giving you a max contract, is kind of surprising because Miles Bridges is pretty damn good. I mean, he's of course, all players want to have a max contract, but for somebody to actually kind of go publicly, then warrant it, and then the organization to say no, it makes you wonder if maybe they just didn't mesh personally, or at least maybe somebody doesn't in the higher ups in Charlotte doesn't like Bridges or doesn't see him as whatever. He's gonna be getting paid is and what could probably happen is Charlotte will go, well, on second thought, and give him the max contract. But yeah, good. I wouldn't sleep on the Pistons, because you know what, that's kind of going home, you know.
Oh, it's going home, and again, then you're joined with Ivy, and you're joined with Cunningham. Like it's a good young core. So at the time of recording this, Bridges has not announced he's going to be a Detroit Piston, but we'll see what kind of plays out throughout the free agency. Now back to the Big Ten, top 10 pick. Johnny Davis came in at number 10, went to the Washington Wizards. How do you feel about that?
I hope he does well. I don't have any. I have about this much more faith in Washington than I do Sacramento. I mean, they're getting ready to trade Bradley Beal or let him go or whatever. No, he opted out.
He opted out,
which blows my stinking mind. Like Russell Westbrook, he would have. Excuse me. I don't know. There might have been needed to be a psych evaluation for Westbrook, because he opted into, what was it, $43 million. And I'm like, well, I didn't know there was an option. Like, even though it's a player option at that amount of money with what you did last year, you should opt in.
Right.
It's kind of like Jason Hayward and the Cubs. He was able to opt out after 3 years of that 8-year contract he signed. And he had been short of a dumpster fire the 3 years he was with the Cubs. Of course he's going to opt in. You know, I mean, you're not going to get that. And unless Westbrook was just absolutely desperate to leave. And I know I've tangented from the Wizards to that, but kind of the same thing. I'm surprised Beal didn't opt in and then try to get a sign and trade or trade done.
Right. No, I agree.
I'm surprised Washington didn't. But I guess he could go anywhere now for like the veteran exception of $6 million a year or whatever, and maybe chase a ring instead, and to each his own. He's probably at the point where he wants to maybe chase a ring rather than the money. He's made a lot of money. He can afford to, you know, if he's been smart financially, he's got his future set up. He doesn't need the money. So yeah, let's go chase a ring. But so Johnny Davis, good luck, because I totally think you're going to be on a complete rebuild, because I don't know, other than Bradley Beal, what Washington has. I'm sure they have more. I don't watch the NBA or study the NBA enough to even think of that. I know what Washington's going to do, except for the track history that I've seen in the past few years.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And for the Big Ten, we were talking before the draft that maybe the Big Ten would have 4 lottery picks, and instead the Big Ten just ended up having 4 first-round picks. The other one in the first round was Malachi Branham, who's expected to maybe be a lottery pick. He goes at number 20 to San Antonio. And honestly, when you start looking at sleepers of the draft, that's one of the first ones that maybe comes to mind.
Yeah, San Antonio, if they know anything, they know how to draft. So if you're one or sign free agents, you never see them just going out and throwing a ton of money at people. It's always they're signing somebody that, you know, under the radar signing. And this year, the extreme exception to what the Spurs normally are. Like they weren't the normal Spurs, and I'm using air quotes, but you can't see it. Spurs. For them to draft him and get him, that means they think highly of him. And could he be Kawhi Leonard-ish?
Whew. That's it's just tough to put those expectations on somebody. I wouldn't have put Kawhi's expectations or his success on Kawhi coming out of the college, but maybe I kind of see what you're saying there.
Yeah, pop quiz. What team drafted Kawhi Leonard?
Ooh, I don't know actually. If it wasn't the Spurs,
It wasn't.
who was it?
The Indiana Pacers. And then they traded him to San Antonio.
Nice.
On draft day. So like it was one of those, and I don't get the teams, hey, will you pick this guy for us? We'll trade you something for him. Just make the trade, unless they can't trade picks in progress, like while the draft's in progress or their picks in progress, they can't trade a pick, but just trade them the pick. Let them select. That way we don't have the awkward Kobe Bryant wearing a Hornets hat.
Right.
Or Ray Allen and Stephon Marbury, I believe they were drafted. Ray Allen was drafted by the Timberwolves, and Marbury was drafted by the Bucks, and they swapped.
Yep. No, I mean you're right. It would avoid a little bit of awkwardness.
Dalton.
I get it. I totally get it.
I'm old. Live with me.
I pulled up the second round here. I'm just going to list off real quick the Big Ten players drafted in the second round, and you can kind of mention whoever stands out to you. The second pick in the second round was Caleb Houston from Michigan. He landed with the Orlando Magic. At pick 35 overall, Max Christie from Michigan State landed with the Lakers. Now, keep in mind, too, there's a little bit of history between Michigan State and pick number 35. That's where Xavier Tillman came off the board for the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's where Draymond Green came off the board for the Golden State Warriors. So who knows? Maybe Christie can follow those steps moving forward.
Magic of pick 35.
That's right. Pick 40 to the Timberwolves was Bryce McGowan's, the freshman from Nebraska. Pick 41 by the Pelicans was another Buckeye. And this, to me, might be the sleeper of the whole draft. I'll get your thoughts on it in a moment, but that was E.J. Liddell. And finally, for the Big Ten, at pick 43, the Clippers took Moussa Diabate out of Michigan. So that wraps up the Big Ten in the NBA draft. To me, Liddell has to be the sleeper. We were talking about him as a first rounder, and he ends up dropping in the 40s. To me, that's where you look at when you're looking at kind of somebody just went off the radar.
Yeah, and, there were people from the Big Ten that didn't get drafted, ended up signing, free agent contracts to play in the summer league. But E.J. Liddell's drop was just meteoric. Isn't quite fitting for it, but that was like Aaron Rodgers-esque without the glamour, I guess.
He wasn't top end hype.
Yeah, because they were talking potentially low 20s, like 20, 25, like Liddell could go in that window somewhere, and he ends up in the 41st pick. Now my question is, does that at all, are they planning that if Liddell works out and he's on the roster, that he subs in for Zion, or play him at the same time, or Zion might be leaving? I don't know. It's a little perplexing because in size Zion's taller, but they're kind of the same build of player.
A little bit. I would say,
I guess Liddell's a little more lanky than Zion, right?
Yeah. I was laterally or kind of on the perimeter. Liddell's maybe more fit out there, where Zion is just going to be a bully around the basket. So really, ideally, I guess you could go Liddell 3, Zion 4, and that's avoiding or ignoring all the other pieces that the Pelicans have. But in theory, I think Liddell's a small forward at this spot. I think a power forward
I'm
for
just
him
used to him
reach.
to being a power forward / center in the Big Ten, college wise, because he's playing against guys that he's not hulking over. So once you hit the NBA, everybody's hulking. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, okay, I get it. I guess I read too much into it. Dalton, darn it. Why you gotta do that to me?
There's the Big Ten in the NBA draft for 2022. Let's go ahead and close out the first quarter. When we come back, we got some Big Ten football to talk.
Word.
And we'll be talking to Big Ten football. Started off with Kirk Herbstreit, because you go back this last week. Yeah, this last week. Trying to make sure my calendar is right in my head. In East Lansing, or just Lansing, there was the golf outing for the High Five Drew Stanton Foundation. Of course, Drew Stanton was a former Michigan State quarterback in the early to mid 2000s. And then there was a group that they partnered with, Special Olympics Michigan Area 8, and they held together this great golf outing that brought out Mel Tucker. It brought out Baker Mayfield. It brought out Kirk Herbstreit. I mean, it was a who's who walking around there at the country club.
Yeah.
And we actually ended up with a moment, the media, where we were able to catch up with Kirk Herbstreit a little bit before he talked for the Q&A, as he landed from the flight, didn't even get to golf. Landed, joined for the Q&A, and then got on another plane and left, because he's Kirk Herbstreit and he's a very busy guy. But
didn't have time to play any golf, but he could go. Yeah. And is this picture that is with the video, is that a picture of him at the outing?
Yes, and that's
so he took time to dress like he was golfing, but not actually golf.
Well, maybe he was thinking, who knows when my plane gets there, but maybe I can get something in.
Oh,
but
yeah, maybe he was dressed and ready to go, like, he's on the starting blocks to get off the plane, and then realized there's no chance.
He's just being a good sport, maybe, at the end of the day. Who knows?
Well, had you not said anything, I would have never known he didn't play.
Right.
Maybe that's what it is. He's on video and he's like, oh, they'll think I played, whatever.
So we caught up with him a little bit before the Q&A, and here he's talking a little bit about the end of last season, Michigan beating Ohio State, and what that means for the Big Ten. Yeah. And then you'll hear me a little bit in the background ask about the upcoming Big Ten football season, kind of getting a picture of what he thinks, and we'll get his answer as well. So, and also, just for the listeners and viewers, this is a bit of a new thing that Sam and I are doing. So bear with us, because Sam is going to pull us out.
Since half of the stuff you sent me isn't
working. So we'll pull out. We'll put the Kirk Herbstreit video up, and for the listeners and viewers too, it is just a still picture with the audio. It's not a moving video, so nothing good. But the audio is good. So don't worry about your computer. Your computer's fine. It is a still picture. Nope. So
reset as soon as you see the non-moving. Reset it, then come back to us. Yeah, and it'll still be the same, but at least you'll reset your computer.
You can feel better about
Not enough people take care of their electronics, Dalton. You need to restart every once in a while.
So we'll pull out. And again, we're starting with Kirk Herbstreit talking about Michigan's win over Ohio State and what it means for the Big Ten.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're just looking at it from 30,000 feet and looking at the conference, just like when Alabama gets beat, Auburn beats Alabama, it's good for the SEC. So if you're just an objective fan, Michigan beating Ohio State on that big of a stage was definitely great for the Big Ten. It wasn't great for me or Ohio State fans, but I think it was great for the conference and great for Jim Harbaugh, because he's been so close and he needed that win. And it was like his own fans were ready to turn on him. And if he would have lost that game, there would have been a lot of people calling the shows the next week saying, it's enough's enough, get him out of here. I mean, there was a lot at stake for him in that game. So from that perspective, it's good. And I love when that rivalry personally is healthy and competitive and kind of going back and forth. So I don't like to see it one-sided. So, yeah, I mean, it's good for the Big Ten for sure.
Understanding that we're late in June, you mentioned Michigan State. Michigan obviously wins the Big Ten last year. Ohio State looking the way they are. I kind of want to get your thoughts on the upcoming Big Ten season, because it seems like obviously Ohio State's shown that they're kind of at the top throughout recent years, but the gap maybe.
I think it's great. I think first what Jim Harbaugh and Michigan did last year for their program and for the Big Ten was great. I mean, as an Ohio State guy, that day was tough to watch. As a fan, I stood on the sideline and watched the game, but to see how they celebrated and how much it meant to their program. Long term, that's great for the Big Ten. What Mel's created, the energy and the buzz that's around this program, that we haven't felt, since Dino really had them rolling those 3 years with Connor Cook. It's great to see that energy. I think Penn State's close. I think Wisconsin and Iowa Is Nebraska going to get better with Scott Frost? They came so close so many times last year, could have easily won 9 games. So I like to see when we turn on games on Saturday, I don't want to see 2 teams and everybody else. I like to see 7 or 8, 9 teams competing, and I think we'll have that this year.
So interesting comments. I suppose, Sam, I'll just open it up to you first. What do you take away from Kirk's analysis of the Big Ten, and also what it means that Michigan beat Ohio State and kind of dethroned the king?
It's kind of the same way that I talked a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the Big Ten basketball season and IU being, I'm going to use the air quotes again, back. Well, when the traditional blue bloods or traditional big dogs of the conference do well, it bodes well for the conference. And, it only gives validity when your traditionally good schools are doing well. And I totally agree that when Michigan is able to compete and beats Ohio State, it doesn't matter if it's 1 out of 10 or, they start going a run and win 4 out of 5 against them. It's going to make that rivalry a little bit more intense. And then it's also going to pull the eyes of everybody to the conference. And, when, Ohio State's won 9 in a row or whatever, and then Michigan wins, well, that draws attention. And so I don't disagree with him on the aspect of when it's for the conference, it totally boosts it up, and people start paying attention to more than just 2 teams. They look to see what else there is. And when the rest of or at least there are some other schools that are operating well, it does nothing but help recruiting. It does, because you know what, when there's 2 teams and let's say Minnesota is going after a recruit, they can say, look, we can contend with you. Mm-hmm. We can fight against Michigan and Ohio State. So I think I don't give 2 hoots about either of those 2 teams, but it is important that both of them win in order to make the conference overall a better conference.
Well, and I think too, you heard him say a couple of times that when you have 8 different teams that are mm-hmm. capable and strong, it just makes everything that much better and that much more fun. And I think honestly, that's kind of the beauty of the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. And what's great too, for football, SEC has that quite a bit. The bottom though of the SEC is maybe worse than the bottom of the Big Ten, I would say, with Vanderbilt and some of those teams, the way they've performed in recent history. But like you look at the Big Ten, and just about across the board in all sports, they're deep. Yeah. Basketball, I mean, it has more depth in basketball than any other conference. Yeah. I mean, you can make the argument the ACC is better if you want. And honestly, if you want to talk depth, the Big 12 the last couple of years is in that same conversation, just to give them their due respect. But like the Big 10 has been in the last decade or so the deepest conference in basketball, and it's been maybe the deepest in football. I mean, you can make the conversation for the SEC, like you can have that talk, but nonetheless, like that's the beauty of the Big Ten. What I'm really curious about is I kind of asked him there and said, do you think the gap is starting to maybe close a little? And you could kind of hear my voice. I know it was pretty deep in the background,
skeptical.
But it started to kind of fade because I'm like, boy, is it? Like, I mean, Michigan dethroned the king one time, but is that sustainable? You know what I mean? Like, was it just kind of a once in a while type of thing? Because Ohio State's going to enter this next season, I believe, in most of the preseason polls, number 2. Like, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that, because let's see, before that, the last Big Ten loss for Ohio State. So before they lost to Michigan, was to Purdue when Rondale Moore was still in school. So that was 2+ years ago.
The Tyler Trent night.
Yes, Tyler Trent night. So like that was the last time they lost a Big Ten game. And excuse me. So anomalies happen. Is this an anomaly, or is this Michigan going saying, okay, we're ready. We're on the same page as you. We're just getting going. You don't know until this year happens, and then if Michigan beats them, then you're like, well, maybe, you know, and the cycles don't end on one game. They just don't.
Right.
And is it, like you asked about the talent gap, or that gap between Ohio State and the rest of the conference, that doesn't necessarily close up just because of one loss either.
Correct.
And it does not mean that Michigan's up there yet.
Correct.
Because they've literally had one season where they had a good season on top of beating Michigan or Ohio State. So I don't think you can judge it quite yet. You can have an opinion. That's fine. That's not what I'm getting at. But you're just not sure yet. You can't say definitively, yes, Michigan's here. Yes, the talent gap or that competition is now close together because of one game. You just can't yet.
Yeah. No, it's fair. And as we flip into July, the number one thing you can really go off of is recruiting rankings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Ohio State's still just at the top. It just is what it is. But it will be interesting to see this upcoming year, because we haven't necessarily, since Ryan Day's been in charge, everything has been, it seems like, pretty easy in Columbus, except for the one loss to Michigan. Like, it just, there's all this talent. There's 5 stars all over the field. They blow everybody out. Games are never even close. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious this next year, now that they've kind of taken a ding finally under Day, how that bounces back for the Buckeyes. I'm very curious how this next year happens, because I still think they have the most talent in the Big Ten. But maybe, and trust me, I have a lot of belief and confidence in Ryan Day, so I'm expecting there to be a bounce back even stronger than what we saw at the beginning of the Ryan Day era.
God help Notre Dame.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's not because I think the talent gap is so huge that it's going to be a dumpster fire. But like you said, you know, they're coming off their last game that mattered. And I'm not saying that the Rose Bowl doesn't matter, but it literally is an exhibition if it's not for
it's not the old Rose Bowl.
Yeah. And it's not just because it was Pac-12 Big Ten doesn't matter either, because it didn't have the same feel, you know. Traditionally that should have been Michigan and Utah. You know, if you went by champions, but still the point being is that that's still an exhibition because it wasn't in the playoff. So while it counted, it didn't matter. You know, that's why Olave and what was it, Garrett Wilson, wasn't it, that opted out not to play in it. So, and they still put up 8,000 points in yards.
Well, Jackson Smith and Jigba broke the receiving record that game.
Because that allowed him to really step onto the stage as the guy. Which good on him.
He's back.
You know? Hey, if you're gonna have a game on one of the biggest stages of college football, you know. But my whole point on that is you know, God help Notre Dame, because this now will count. And I don't think Ohio State takes foot off the gas until the final gun at all zeros. You know, maybe if they're up by 45 with 4 or 5 minutes left, they'll let up maybe and put the second or third string in, but I think they want to make a statement personally. I just, and that it warms my heart a little because it's Notre Dame, but at the same time, I'm not a big, huge fan of Ohio State either. So
this is your worst nightmare, seeing these two. Somebody's got to win the game.
2005 could have been my worst nightmare, because that was the year the White Sox won the World Series and the Astros and the Cardinals went to Game 7 in the NLCS. That would have been a horrible time to live.
I think 2005 Notre Dame and Ohio State played in the Fiesta Bowl, if I remember right, too.
You might be right. That was when Jalen Smith blew out his knee in the Fiesta Bowl.
Not 05. 05 was Brady Quinn and them going against
that's right.
DJ Hawk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My fault.
Yeah, geez, the Jalen Smith. There's been a couple of those matchups, but
that wasn't 05. That was more closely that was more close. Wasn't it?
Yeah, that's got to be.
We're in 2022,
somewhere in
05,
there.
17 years ago.
Anyways, talking about Ohio State and Notre Dame, because it's a great way to kick off the college football season. We're going to talk on the other side when we get to the third quarter after this halftime break a little bit more about those big time non-conference matchups in college football, and we'll dabble a little bit with college basketball as well. So stay with us.
There was an interesting little tidbit that I heard that I threw at you that I like the idea with college football. Rick Neuheisel. So
we'll discuss it after this.
Yeah, I've poorly piqued their interest. So let's go to the break. You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
Hi, I'm Tina Jaramillo.
And I'm Hillary Doherty.
And we host the Muck Podcast, where we discuss the dark and sometimes weird true stories in American politics.
Hey, Tina, did you know that Elvis crashed the Nixon White House for the sole purpose of getting a DEA badge? And it worked?
What? Or how a gun control advocate senator out of California engaged in gun trafficking with notorious gang leader Shrimp Boy.
Shrimp Boy, I remember him. Okay, so, we cover all of that and more from maladies, madness, mischief, and murder in U.S. politics.
And we also host a bi-weekly interview segment called Lil Muck.
We interview politicians, journalists, activists, and others who share their experiences in politics.
Find the Muck Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and check us out on social media at the Muck Podcast.
Hey, I'm Pantsless Aaron.
This is Stevie.
And I'm Augie.
And we are BFYTW, a podcast all about playing games and having fun. Our games are usually based on British panel shows and game shows, but we'll play anything that captures our attention and imagination. Why? It's right there in the title.
You'll never guess what the F stands for.
I know what the F stands for.
Yeah, it's a pretty good tease. Pretty good tease.
Yeah. Well, if you don't know, you know.
All right, second half starts out, and as Sam was saying beforehand, he caught something the other day that piqued his interest a little bit, and it's talking kind of with big time college football games. So Sam, go ahead and explain.
I was listening to the radio, and former UCLA and Washington head coach, and Colorado head coach Rick Neuheisel brought up how, like, in the middle of the conference season, you have Georgia playing Vanderbilt, you have Ohio State playing Rutgers, you have just the top teams in the conference playing kind of the bottom feeders, and there's not really always any top games that are of interest to the whole entire country. You got that ABC Saturday night game, and it's Baylor and TCU. No offense to those teams, but you're talking to Texas there. You're not talking to, and maybe the Big 12, depending on how good TCU and Baylor are. But that's your game of the night. And he proposed that the conferences come to an agreement to where they align to where every week there is a top conference matchup. Now, you have to make these things scheduled out in advance. So there are times that you might get a stinker that was supposed to be, just a team that is supposed to be in the top 10 and ends up falling out like Iowa did last year. But
IU.
Yeah, and IU, correct. Thank you for jumping on the IU bandwagon instead of calling the other thing. Anyways, the point is every week have an Ohio State playing a UCLA, some of those top teams, or Michigan going and playing maybe not Georgia, but Auburn or somebody in the middle of the season.
So yeah, just let me hit the pause. So the suggestion is to have non-conference. It's not to align your conference schedules.
No. Correct. Okay. Sorry, I kind of explained it a little bit as you're still playing your normal conference, schedule, but maybe you lead off the season with your game against Rutgers, Ohio State, and then in week 4 you go and play UCLA rather than kicking the season off with UCLA to where there are 4 or 5 games that the whole country's interested in. You spread those out to where you keep everybody's interest all the way throughout the regular season to kind of give some value to the whole season throughout. That was the proposal that he made, and I kind of like that idea. Why not have a big time game of the week?
So I don't like the idea.
Okay.
And the
Is
reason
go ahead. I'm not going to guess. I'm going to let you.
The reason I don't like the idea is because in my mind, as college athletics continues to watch like everything fall apart, right? Between what the NIL's created, between transfer portal stuff is created, like a lot of pageantry's gone, a lot of school pride, a lot of that stuff is gone. One thing that I think still matters, especially now, and I want to ensure that it still matters, is winning your conference. That's why I think when it comes to postseason play in the college football playoffs, like we were talking about the Rose Bowl earlier on, and it used to be you had to win the Big Ten, you had to win the Pac-12, and that's how, or Pac-10 in those days, or even Pac-8 in those days. But that's how you would get into that game. You won your conference. And I think if you kind of build that simplicity where it's about winning your conference, and that's how you get rewarded in college football and in the postseason, let's keep conferences, the conference championships mattering. And so the reason I don't like the idea is because when you stick that in the middle of the season in the conference pursuit, like in the Big Ten, let's take that for an example. We just finished talking about how deep it is. We've watched Wisconsin get derailed with a trip to Illinois at times, just because the Big Ten is chaotic. It's cannibalism each week. Like that somebody upends somebody, and it's kind of the beauty of the Big Ten.
In fairness, a lot of conferences are that way. So it's not just a Big Ten exclusive thing to where, it's a lot of different. I mean, Texas went to Lawrence and lost to Kansas.
Right. No, I agree. I just think it's enhanced in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten's the biggest example of chaos, or the biggest representative. And so my point is, I do not like the idea of distracting these teams from the conference championships that I think maybe should be a top priority for all schools when you start the season. And it's kind of like we talked about this before with college basketball. There's the idea out there about the flex scheduling maybe coming in the next couple of years. And that flex scheduling is not going to include the Power Five or the Big Six, whatever you want to, with Big East being involved.
Yeah. There's more than basketball. 5 in basketball.
Yeah. And the reason why is because they're in the middle of their conference championship hunts, and to them it's not worth being bothered because they're already playing strong enough games. They don't necessarily need that. It doesn't make the most sense. So really all we're talking about here, I think that the variable we're hitting on is from an entertainment factor. And I think for the most part, week to week, you usually have a pretty solid game going on, if not a few. I can only remember a couple of different weeks where I sat there and I'm like, wow, don't have a ton of interest watching college football on this Saturday. So that's why ultimately I'm against it, because I don't like the idea of distracting teams from the conference championships, because I believe that should be a top priority in college football as we move forward and try and keep it something sacred.
So what if they said, okay, for the first 6 weeks, there was going to be that. Then after that, the final 6 games, I guess 6 games, like each team
that gets me more on board.
So for the first half of the season, you've got that rotating type somebody play, and then you have your conference specific, kind of to where the last 6 games you play. Because I think you're right. I didn't even think about it while I was listening to it. That could derail seasons. A team, playing outside of what they were expected. They're 6-1. Minnesota, let's use Minnesota just because they're not the prototypical year in, year out great team, but they're always pretty respectable, at least as of late. They're 5-1, 13th in the country, and they go to, Clemson. And Clemson blows their doors off. And then the next week they fall to Northwestern because they're just on such a downslide. And then all of a sudden Rutgers comes into town. Yeah, I could see the derailment of a season because of just one poor outing against a really, really good team or something, or just not being as competitive with that team that given year. Because like I said, you've got to schedule it out. So you're going to get some stinkers from it, even though traditionally, let's say Michigan loses 4 games going into a game against, Georgia, and Georgia's number 2 in the country. There's going to be some ugliness, and so I get it a little bit more, but maybe the first half of the season, have those flex, I guess, to where you flex your schedule to where, you play an out of conference good team rather than, Southwest Missouri State College.
That's kind of the thing too, is the SEC does this already with FCS opponents. It feels like towards the end of the season, and I'm not
every
a fan of that.
Team plays like Florida A&M or what, so a team like that in the middle of their schedule. So they struggle, maybe against an SEC opponent, and then the next week they win 65-13 because they played Alabama State
right before they go into the final couple of weeks in their schedule.
Make them make them feel good about themselves, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But no, I'm kind of on board with what you're saying there. I think once you hit mid-October, it can only be conference games.
Yeah.
It can only be conference.
I don't disagree that that's probably a better idea, but I like the concept of the
creating big matchups.
Yeah, creating big matchups, because you know what? Everybody's talking, even though a lot of people think Ohio State's going to just run the gambit on Notre Dame, that's still a talking game. Like it's a big matchup.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen that often to two huge traditional big blue bloods in college football. It doesn't happen every year. So it's one of those that's like the novelty of it, and then also the potential of these two huge traditionally great teams playing each other to kick the season off.
Yeah. No, I think we found common ground. So look at that. Two sides can come together.
Hey, it is possible. And you know what? There was no yelling or nothing.
How about that? Cordial, respectful. Look at
we were adults. Look at us being adults. Good on us.
All right. So real quick, before we take our last break and get into the fourth quarter, I want to run through some stuff because we do have some matchups announced involving Big Ten basketball. If we switch over to the hardwood for a moment. We have Big Ten ACC. We have the Gavitt games. I wanted to pull up those matchups and try running through those if we could talk about those. Go ahead.
Can I ask you, how do they determine those matchups? Do you know? Do they literally pull them out of a hat unless there's a big marquee matchup? Because for Purdue, I'm tired of seeing Marquette, and I'm tired of seeing a Florida State.
Florida State, I fully understand. So, no, I
and
don't
it's not that I have anything against those two teams. I'm just tired of seeing those two teams play Purdue. Because in these two,
I get it.
So
looking at the matchups for this year, Boston College is at Nebraska, Pitt is at Northwestern, Georgia Tech is at Iowa, Minnesota is at Virginia Tech, Penn State's at Clemson, Wake Forest at Wisconsin, Maryland at Louisville, and now we're halfway if you're keeping track at home. Syracuse at Illinois. Michigan State's at Notre Dame, Virginia at Michigan, Rutgers at Miami, Purdue at Florida State, North Carolina at Indiana, and Ohio State at Duke. What jumps out to you from that list?
The only matchup that I see as potentially a really, really good matchup is North Carolina and IU.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know how they match them up. Notre Dame and Michigan State could be a good one.
I think that one's intriguing. Now, and remember too, because Notre Dame just lost Blake Wesley, a first-round pick in that NBA draft. But and forgive me for not being up on the Irish basketball here as we flip into July. I'm not exactly sure what pieces are coming in, but folks are fairly high on Notre Dame for losing such a monumental piece.
Well, I was going to say, and I don't mean this in the way that it's going to come out. They only lost Blake Wesley, like, from their roster.
Mm-hmm.
So but like I said, I don't mean it as in, well, he's nothing, but like they only have to replace that. That's a big thing to replace, but the other pieces are still kind of there, Yep. So it could be a really good matchup. But I just don't know. It's not one that jumps out like, oh, hey, and Ohio State. What are they going to be after losing Liddell and Branham? They go to play Duke.
They've brought some transfer pieces in, but yeah, again, until we see Ohio State, I just don't know what to expect from Ohio State.
So literally the only matchup that really sticks out in the Big Ten ACC games is North Carolina and IU. That's the only matchup that I would say, ooh, that's a really good matchup.
That's the biggest to me.
And I'm not at all saying that, it needed to be Michigan State and Duke, because we see that every year.
Yes.
Pretty much. I mean, if not every year, almost every year. So that's not, and I'm not even saying it wouldn't be a good matchup. But like, again, we just came off the Rick Neuheisel, proposal. there is an entertainment factor in these things, because if you've got Northwestern playing Clemson every year, nobody wants to watch that.
Yep.
So, you've got to give some variety. Syracuse is historically, with Jim Boeheim, a really good, historic program. Wouldn't you think Northwestern would like to play Jim Boeheim, or bring Boeheim in to Chicago? And oh wow, now we can go to the United Center. It is United Center, right?
They play at Welsh Ryan Arena.
Right. I'm saying take it to there so you can fill it up.
Oh, okay. I see.
So you've got a special venue. Syracuse is coming into town. I'm honestly thinking if Syracuse is coming into town, more people are going to show up. So you're either going to pack Welsh Ryan, or you're going to be able to put some butts in the seats at the United Center. Unless they're just randomly pulling it out of the hat saying, okay, we're going to make one matchup. Then after that, everybody's just being thrown into a hat and pulled out randomly. Unless that's the case, they need to do better on their matchups.
Fair enough.
I have nothing against Florida State, but I'm tired of seeing Purdue play Florida State in the ACC Big Ten matchup or thing. Maybe
challenge.
Challenge. Thank you. I couldn't think of it, so I said thing. But I guess Purdue needs to schedule Florida State onto their schedule. That way they don't get them in the challenge.
Yeah, that'd be one way. Or in the Gavitt games, as you said, you're a little tired of Marquette. And for the 2022 Gavitt games, Marquette comes to West Lafayette. So that kind of keeps.
It will be the first time that Shaka is with Marquette out of the 3 times that they've played them.
Fair enough.
But that's the only. Purdue doesn't want to play Shaka Smart anyways. They got beat by VCU in the tournament a few
in that run.
Oh, in that run where it seemed like for 4 straight years there was a play-in game team that made it to the Final Four.
Yes.
And so it was like, okay, I don't want to see VCU, and I don't like. It's not that I don't like Shaka Smart, but I just don't want Purdue playing them because it's kind of like Chris Beard. They finally got over that one this year, beating Texas and Chris Beard. But there are just some coaches that have your number, and Shaka's one of them. So.
Well, in the other Gavitt games lineup, let me run through these real quick.
Sure.
DePaul at Minnesota, Nebraska at St. John's, Northwestern at Georgetown, Butler at Penn State. We mentioned Marquette at Purdue, Iowa at Seton Hall, Indiana at Xavier. Iowa at Seton Hall might be good. I like Indiana at Xavier, but to me, the headliner is Villanova at Michigan State. I think that should be a fun one.
Even though Jay Wright's not there anymore, it's that doesn't mean that the talent isn't still in Philadelphia at Villanova. That's going to be a good game. And so last year, that was Purdue's matchup was Villanova. Michigan State playing Villanova. That's a great matchup that doesn't happen every year.
And the Gavitt games, at least to my knowledge, I think this is the 3rd Gavitt game Michigan State's participating in. The first
because it's not every year because they don't match up, correct, number wise.
Well, yeah. So the Gavitt games are every year, but not every team's playing.
That's what I mean. Not every year, meaning not every team plays in it because the numbers don't match up.
And Michigan State always has different variables with their schedules because, like this year, there's a ton of momentum, and it sounds like the aircraft carrier game is coming back against Gonzaga.
I love
Classic.
that, dude.
I know.
When they played North Carolina a few years back on the aircraft carrier, that was I had no rooting interest in either of the teams, and it was awesome to watch.
Yep,
it just was. Now I don't know how the players adjust to it, having a wide open sky shooting into it, but whew. And what happens if it rains? Do they have a secondary site? Or do they delay it?
There are a lot of stories. So they kind of did delay it the last time it happened because they were looking at the forecast in San Diego, which never rains, was showing rain all day. And so everybody was freaked out. And then, of course, it ended up passing by. There's all kinds of stories about that San Diego game that you're talking about from 11-11-11. But yes,
it was great.
Yeah. But so Michigan State's first Gavitt game was at Seton Hall a few years ago. And then last year, Michigan State went to Butler. And so this will be the first time, to my knowledge, that Michigan State hosts a Gavitt game, and it'll be against Villanova. So nice little diversity there. So
Mom's dog decided to come out and say hi.
Oh, well, I want to pet him too.
See?
He's got thoughts on Michigan State's basketball schedule.
She has thoughts. Yes. But those games, and like I said, those are the entertainment factor games, and that's what, and since there's no trophy, they should be clearly for entertainment and put the best matchups together. Yep. Now, you're always going to have some of Northwestern against Clemson, or those. I hate the term bottom feeders, but the bottom feeder matchups, It just happens. But you could do better on putting your top teams against one another and making those really show off your top. You want to say you're the best conference. Winning the most games in those things isn't necessarily the thing. It's your biggest matchups. You win them.
Yep. No.
Now you want to win them all and take the overall. But if the Big Ten loses every game except for Xavier IU, Iowa, Seton Hall, and Michigan State, Villanova, that's a successful games.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. So I don't know if Sam's hand is off the dog yet, but if you're ready, we can move to the fourth quarter. And
she's down here. She's gonna give me moral support for my headline. I guess I don't know. No, she's walking. Good. She's walking away. She's lost interest.
She's like, I'm done with this now.
Yeah, I'm not helping you with anything, Mister.
All right, let's hit the fourth.
Yes, sir.
If you're new to the program, this is the area where we bring out our headlines. And yes, shame on you as Sam whispers into the mic. But we always start with Sam Sprunger and the Sam Sentinel. So, Sam, what's on the headline?
Always start with Sam Sentinel. I guess age before beauty. I don't know. I'm not calling you pretty, but
I'm touched.
No, 7-14, Dalton. Do you know what that is? 7-14.
I don't know.
It is the overall conference record for our national champion baseball team at one point before they turned things around to go and win the national championship. I'm talking about
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. They won 18 of 20 games to end the season to bring home the national championship. And I heard their coach, and off the top of my head, I cannot for the life of me remember what his name is off the top of my head. But he was talking that they never gave up the hope and knowing that they were good enough to win a national title. And national titles don't come easily to anybody. And looking at the history of sports at Ole Miss, they really don't come easy for their teams. Just recently, they won a women's golf national title as a team, but then nothing. For the history of Ole Miss, they've been playing football for, or sports for well over 100 years and have never experienced a men's national title in any sport. And I watched some of the final series, and wow, they were a team. It wasn't, they had standouts that did very, very well, but they won as a team. You could tell that they supported each other, and it's from 7-14. In my belief is at 7-14, they didn't go, well, get better luck next year. It was, we're going to play our game. We're going to take it. And then it's cliche. And as much as I do, cliches are only cliche because they're absolutely true most of the time. And they took one game at a time, and they ended up putting together. There was a writer for Ole Miss, a beat writer that's actually, when they were 7-14, published an article that said they need to stop worrying about the NCAA tournament, and they need to worry about trying to get into the SEC tournament. That's how close they were to not making it too. They were also the 64th team to make the field. They weren't the 64th seeded team, but they were the 64th team to make the tournament. And which essentially, that's, hey, you got there, great, yay. but they took advantage of the opportunity, kind of like Fresno State did a few years back, where they came out of nowhere and won the national championship. Ole Miss went from 7-14 in their conference, the 64th team into the tournament, and won 18 out of their last 20 games to win a national title. And you know what? Congratulations to the Rebels down in Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah, that's it's quite the story. It was really fun, and of course, a great way to kind of cap off the college athletics year. And kind of hand in hand with that, Sam, as we move to the Dalton Daily. With that, putting a bow on the 2021 to 2022 college sports season, we now have national champions for all of the sports for this past calendar year. So they who did this? Reddit CFB, a Twitter account for college football fans that usually communicate on Reddit. Yeah. They put a list out there of all the national champions, and they broke it down by conference as well. So the leading conferences were the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the SEC with 7 national titles. So the entire Power 5 minus the Big 10, which isn't the most comforting thing. The Big 10 came in second
Dalton,
with 5.
Our show is Big 10 plus 4. No, I'm joking.
I was a little shocked when I read it. I was like, huh.
So the Big 10 had 5. What were they?
They were women's ice hockey. Ohio State won the national title there. They were wrestling. Penn State won the national championship there. Women's volleyball. Wisconsin won the national title there. Field hockey. Northwestern won the national championship there. And men's lacrosse. Maryland had the undefeated perfect season. But you had 5 different programs win a national championship for the Big Ten Conference this year. I just wanted to, salute those 5 programs and what they're able to accomplish, but also it's kind of amazing because you look at a lot of the other ones, there's a lot of schools that had multiple. For the Big Ten to spread it out like that goes back to kind of the depth conversation we had in the past.
Yeah, it's they were only 2 behind, so it wasn't like they were extremely
blown out
in second. But yeah, that's an impressive thing because, like you said, I mean, the colleges or the conferences that have 7, I'm sure there were repeats, in there. Was the Big Ten the only one that did that, where a different team won each of theirs in those top 4 conferences or 5 conferences? I mean, or was there another conference that did it better than the Big Ten?
The SEC might have. Hang on. Oh no, the SEC didn't. So no, I think. Well, except for the Big Sky, the Big West, and the GLVC that all had 1 national champion.
Well, they don't count.
The Summit had 2 national champions. But no, for those Power 5, everybody had a school that won different sports this year. So the Big Ten's the only one that was fully spread, I guess.
I guess, like you said, that just speaks of the I don't know what the parity in the conference, I guess, is the best way to put it, because we have great teams in our conference, but they don't necessarily say, hey, we're gonna win men's lacrosse and women's field hockey. Everybody takes a turn, I guess. I don't know, everybody gets a ribbon, Dalton. I like the it just backs my argument and our argument, I guess, that the Big Ten does, even though they may not win the major national championships, they're just as competitive, if not more competitive than other conferences.
Yeah. So it's certainly something to take note of. Well, we are running out of time. And again, a reminder for all the listeners and viewers has to come to an end. Reminder for listeners and viewers, we are not on next week. We are taking it off with the 4th of July week. Oh,
just imagine me shirtless with sparklers in each hand.
Wow, we couldn't end the show quick enough. No, nonetheless, hope everybody has a great 4th of July out there in the next week.
With aviators and a headband.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, let's just close things down. For Sam Sprunger, shirtless Sam Sprunger with sparklers, a brat, and whatever else he's got
steak.
going on.
It takes a lot of energy to blow stuff up, man.
All right, that's Sam Sprunger. I'm Dalton Shetler. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, no show next week, but we'll be back soon to bring you some more
We'll
Big
be
Ten
back
plus
with
4.
vigor. With vigor.
All the things you brought up, I'm glad we're landing there. So
I'm
that's
still throwing you off, huh? All right. See you later.
See you.